Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our roundtable series, Gender, Science, and Human Rights. My name is Shelley Inglis. I'm Executive Director of the Human Rights Center at the University of Dayton. We're so pleased to have you join us during Women's Month for these conversations. I want to first just thank our partners, the AAAS Science and Human Rights Coalition, with whom we work very closely on a number of various projects, and USAID, who has joined us for this series, thanks to Professor Jamie Small, a faculty fellow of the Human Rights Center and a AAAS fellow at USAID in their Gender Hub. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Professor Denise James. She is Director of Women's and Gender Studies at the University of Dayton.
Thanks, Shelley. Good afternoon. As I was introduced, I'm Denise James, and I direct the University of Dayton Women's and Gender Studies program. And I have the honor of welcoming you all to this first session of the Gender, Science, and Human Rights Roundtable series. As you know, we are here to celebrate Women's History Month, which comes on the heels of Black History Month, and we have the opportunity to remember, recognize, and celebrate the rich and diverse experiences and struggles that comprise our collective communities. The U.S. observance of National Women's History Month began in the early 1980s, first with Women's History Week, and since the week has grown into a month-long commemoration, which includes International Women's Day on March 8th, a celebratory day recognized and promoted by USAID. The Gender, Science, and Human Rights Roundtable series brings together people from government, academic, and nonprofit sectors to address some of the most pressing issues of our time. Its aim is to promote the use of scientific approaches to examine gender inequalities and human rights. Grounded in Dayton, Ohio, this series builds on the legacies of the Beijing Fourth World Conference on Women and the Dayton Peace Accords to end ethnic warfare in the former Yugoslavia, both events that are marking their 26th anniversary in 2021. A Catholic and Marianist university founded in 1850 with a mission of social justice, the University of Dayton strives to be a university for the common good. Our Women's Center has an active research arm. We have academic programs in women's and gender studies and human rights. And in 2013, after 2 decades of human rights advocacy work, scholarship, and programming on our campus, UD established the Human Rights Center. As a social and political philosopher, I know that philosophers sometimes get a bad rap for being ideas people and not people of action. However, I'm a pragmatist by training, and that orientation leads me to be interested in how we can advance our best moral, ethical, and political ideals in the concrete, everyday lives of people. As always, we are in need of both good ideas and good work. As a professor of gender studies, I'm acutely aware of the ways in which the more full integration of people of all genders into scientific fields has radically transformed our understandings of things like health and of what society's problems are. Science that is centered in and responsive to the needs of people is the good work I try to challenge my students to imagine as they begin thinking of what they might contribute to social justice. Together, we frequently ponder the very questions that are the impetus of this series. How might we use good data collection, advances in medicine and technology, and engineering to increase the flourishing of all people? How can we encourage fact-based ethical study of vulnerable groups so that we might advocate for and assess our efforts? What happens when our best ideas and bold creative projects to alleviate suffering and promote thriving are supported through science? As a professor, I often engage people in the realm of ideas in the comfortable space of a classroom. But along with my colleagues here, I do this work with the hope that these experiences will translate into action beyond the confines of the university. On behalf of all of my colleagues, we are pleased to host this series of conversations that address some of our most pressing global problems. With sharply rising social inequalities and recent challenges to the legitimacy of science, we are in desperate need of measured dialogue. These conversations on violence, health, sustainability, and peace spotlight insights from government experts, academics, and advocates who are doing innovative work to make the world a better place. Our conversation today focuses on the link between domestic and international efforts to use scientific knowledge to reduce social inequalities and promote human rights in relation to gender-based violence. In the past year, gender-based violence has accelerated to unprecedented levels during the global coronavirus lockdowns. Experts are calling it a shadow pandemic, and the negative impacts on women and girls will almost certainly reverberate for years to come. In this session, longtime advocates in the anti-violence field will discuss our current crisis, best practices for programming, and where they think we're headed. Our audience today is comprised of undergraduate students, graduate students, academics, community activists, international development practitioners, and more. And we are so very excited to have such a range of individuals in our conversation and audience today. Do mark your calendars and join us for our next 3 sessions where we will discuss respectively health, sustainability, and peace every Thursday in March at 3:35 p.m. Eastern Time. And now I'd like to turn it over to Jamie Small.
Thanks, Denise, for those opening remarks. It's a wonderful framing for this first dialogue in the Gender, Science, and Human Rights series. One of the things that's most exciting to me about this series is its interdisciplinary nature. We're considering the best ways to use evidence to solve gendered social problems. But this approach, as we know, is not limited to any one academic discipline. So it's really a great honor to have a philosopher kick off the series. I'll be moderating the conversation. My name is Jamie Small, and I'm an assistant professor of sociology at the University of Dayton here in Ohio. But I'm also here wearing 2 different hats. So one is professor and one as a gender-based violence advisor at the U.S. Agency for International Development. I'm working at USAID for the year through the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship Program. In my own research, I study the intersection of law and sexual violence. And I've been in this field for many years now, so I can say without any shadow of a doubt that we have a phenomenal lineup of speakers this afternoon. Before we get started, I want to situate our dialogue within the historical context in which we're living right now. It has been a difficult year. We are coming up on the 1-year mark of the COVID-19 shutdowns, and at this stage, the global losses associated with the pandemic are unquantifiable. The illness and death rate simply cannot capture the profound human loss that we are experiencing. We also had a summer of racial justice protests, which really brought to light the enduring structures of racial inequality in the United States long after our civil rights movement. And then we had an incredibly contentious presidential election and a subsequent attack on our nation's capital. And we know that these political and cultural conditions have exacerbated patterns of gender-based violence. So I don't think it's an overstatement to say that we are reeling. We are in a difficult time, but it's also an incredibly important time. Moments of crisis, even with their terrible, terrible losses, also offer us an opportunity to reflect, to take stock, and to renew. And that's exactly what we are here to do today. We have a diverse audience. As Denise pointed out, we are comprised of UD students, faculty and staff, and USAID staff, as well as anti-violence practitioners from the field. So our conversation today is going to be less technocratic and less programmatic, although we do hope certainly that you'll get a strong sense of the amazing work that these panelists have been doing for many years now. But we're going to take this next hour or so to focus a bit more on a conversation from the heart, to see what drives these committed advocates and see what insights unfold as they have the opportunity to engage with one another. So I would like to turn now to our intrepid panelists. I'm going to let our speakers introduce themselves, but just to give you a broad strokes overview of who you're going to be hearing from today, we've got 6 amazing panelists. So first, we've got Che Shenoy, who is a senior gender-based violence advisor at USAID. We've got Erica Curran, who is an assistant professor of lawyering skills at the law school at UD. We've got Rosa Beltre, who is the executive director of the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. Amber Joy Powell, who is a predoctoral fellow at the American Bar Foundation and also a graduate student at the University of Minnesota. Josh Segalowitz, who is a development associate at the Palladium Group and also a 2020 UD grad, which is very exciting to have him here with us. And finally, Ethan Levine, who is an assistant professor of criminal justice at Stockton University. Their current roles and positions are impressive enough, but just to highlight also that each panelist has a deep and diverse background in the anti-violence field. And I think you'll get a good sense of this in the coming dialogue. Before we get started though, I'd like to make two important points. First, in today's conversation, we're going to be discussing a difficult issue. Gender-based violence impacts all of us. Many of us have been directly impacted, and I would venture to say that all of us have been indirectly affected by gender-based violence, whether we realize it or not. Gender-based violence is an umbrella category that includes sexual assault, intimate partner violence, LGBTQI violence, harassment, and discrimination, as well as harmful cultural practices, such as female genital mutilation and child early and forced marriage. Please feel free to reach out to any of us if you would like additional information on GBV definitions and patterns. But it's all to say that GBV unfortunately permeates the fabric of our social landscapes. And so please take care during this conversation as well as after it. And second, if you have questions as we go, you can drop them in the chat and we will kind of circle through them. The conversation is going to be open-ended with our panelists. We're going to start kind of round robin style, but then we're really going to hope that the panelists can speak to each other. They didn't necessarily know each other beforehand, but they bring this amazing wealth of background and knowledge. So I'm pretty certain that they will spark really fascinating insights among each other. So we've got about 30 to 40 minutes for conversation, and then we'll open it up to audience Q&A. And I'm going to start with our two most youthful panelists today. The rest of us might be at a point which my good friend Kenneth says is embracing middle age. So we want to center the voices of our younger colleagues. And so Josh, I'm going to start with you, and we'll go around and hear from everyone for this same question too. But I'd like you to start and give our listeners a sense of what you do, your organization you're at, your background in this field, and any other important professional stepping stones that kind of brings you to this current point. And we might, as we go, meander it back and pass a little bit, but I just want to give our audience a good sense of who's in the room today, where you're at now, and what your current role looks like. So I'll turn to you, Josh.
Thank you, Jamie, for that introduction. I'm really happy to be here as part of this panel with some really amazing panelists. As far as myself, I'm Josh Segalowitz, currently based in Washington, D.C. Although, as Jamie said, I did just graduate from the University of Dayton in May of 2020. My undergrad degrees are in human rights studies and sociology. Right now working at Palladium International, which is an international development organization based in DC. And I support a USAID funded project called Translating Data for Implementation that essentially looks at the way that different countries collect data on HIV and AIDS and makes recommendations to improve data quality, data use, data warehousing, all of those kinds of things. So actually pretty appropriate to the conversation that we're having right now regarding science and gender. As far as a little bit of my background, during my undergrad, I spent 4 years as a sexual violence peer educator. I worked at the Women's Center as a research assistant, and I completed a thesis about a year ago, actually with Dr. Small as well, on incels. And if people aren't familiar with that, it stands for involuntary celibate. It's essentially a group of men who gather in kind of online spaces and feel a sense of entitlement to women's bodies, particularly they want to have sex with women and perceive this inability to do so. So often results in violence, at least in these online spaces, and then sometimes translates into violence in real life. So I'll leave it at that, go to the other panelists, but I'm really happy to be here.
Thanks so much, Josh. So I'll pop that same question to Amber now.
Well, hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you all. It's such an honor to be on this panel with everybody here today. So a little bit about myself. I am currently a sociology PhD graduate student in the Department of Sociology at the University of Minnesota. I'm actually in Chicago, though, as a American Bar Foundation fellow, currently writing my dissertation. And what my dissertation right now is looking at is trying to understand how formerly incarcerated survivors have been impacted by sexual violence, not only in penal institutions, but also the sexual assault that they probably, or many of them experienced when they got there. So there's sort of a phenomenon that I'm interested in called the sexual assault to prison pipeline, that we tend to see in a lot of people who are incarcerated. And while that's been looked at specifically for young girls, it also happens with boys, and genderqueer youth as well. And so part of what I really try to do is to answer this question of who are we not including in our mainstream discourses of sexual violence. When I was an undergrad, there was a lot of talk about sexual assault on college campuses, but this tended to focus on white women. It tended to focus on middle-class women, heterosexual women. It didn't really include the experiences of other types of people that were not in that umbrella. And so what I've tried to do in graduate school is to answer that question and to think about the ways that people not only experience sexual violence on an interpersonal level, but thinking about the organizations, thinking about a more structural analysis of what sexual violence looks like. So in my own dissertation, I'm looking at not just sort of these individual interactions, but the carceral norms in and of themselves, where you have guards and staff who routinely have to pat people down, give them body cavity searches, and talking to people about what that feels like. And most people talk about that feeling like a violation to them. So that's what I'm working on currently. And I'm also doing policing work, or I've just finished a study doing a policing research project in Minneapolis, where we were, this is before George Floyd, but we were asking people about their experiences and perceptions of police. And so I've been working closely with Michelle Phelps on that project, and also seeing a lot of intersections with gender-based violence, and talking to women in North Minneapolis specifically who talk about not being able to trust police because of these high-profile incidents of police brutality when they are in trouble with a domestic violence or a sexual assault situation. And lastly, I'm doing some work at my university where we're trying to have conversations around what sexual harassment looks like, particularly within graduate student spaces. Again, the focus has typically been on undergraduates, but there's specific sort of cultural context within the graduate school departments that we're trying to address and intervene when it comes to sexual harassment and sexual assault. So I'll leave it there for now, but it's great to be on the panel with everybody.
Thanks so much, Amber. You've got so much work you're doing. It's amazing. I'm going to go, who's next on my screen? Rosa.
Thank you so much. Rosa Beltre, she, her, ella, pronouns, Executive Director of the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. And what a pleasure it is to be amongst you. My apology to be doing this from a car, which was not expected. So as we continue talking about what does our work entail, I was actually testifying today so that before the finance committee, so that the rape crisis centers among the state of Ohio are able to either maintain or increase the line item that we actually receive for services and programmatic, especially with the cuts of VOCA. As an Afro-Latinx, there are many works and hats that intersect. I am also able a missionary as well as an ordained minister for the Spanish Pentecostal churches, and understanding those dynamics of how can we continue to talk about gender-based violence from the perspective of faith, and that it happens in the pews also, and understanding those dynamics not only within the state of Ohio and our coalition as we continue to advocate for survivors, for programs, and working with Title IX coordinators, as well as all of the rape crisis centers among the state of Ohio. My journey is very different probably than most of those within the panel because my background is finance. So for many years, I worked as a banker, a vice president of community relations for many banks within the state of Ohio, and also insurance agencies as an educator on 401k and profit sharing plans, as well as going all around the state of Ohio and ensuring that red tapes would be eliminated for new branches to actually be opened until I landed once again in Ohio after taking a sabbatical to be able to work with gender-based violence victims in Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And I am honored to be here today.
We are so glad you made the professional shift.
Thank you.
I think I'll turn it to Erica now.
Thank you so much. So my background currently, I'm a professor. I ran an immigrant and human rights clinic that focused predominantly on immigrant survivors of sexual violence and domestic violence, and particularly immigrants who were detained in Northeast Florida and Southeast Georgia. And so did a lot of work with detainees and survivors in that context. For me, I'm coming off of, I think, the most challenging legal 4 years in my career for doing immigration work, especially with detained populations, asylum seekers, and even unexpectedly, to some extent, things that I think we thought were generally goodwill cases that we would have no problem getting through became extraordinarily difficult in terms of keeping women and survivors safe and not in detention facilities. So that this past 4 years has been really exhausting, I think, for most immigration attorneys. And now I'm doing a step back, taking a look at the past 4 years and some of the gaps that we identified in protections that really were reliant on the goodwill that wasn't there, and also the impact, the traumatic impact on the continued detention of asylum seekers and survivors of violence. I started my career just after the passage of the Violence Against Women Act and working in migrant health, thinking I was going to be doing health work, but to avoid being charged with the unauthorized practice of law, because I was getting a lot of stories that I realized, hey, there's this law I can help people stay in the United States if they want to. I went to law school and started doing that legal work, and now I'm looking at ways we can improve the health access of these survivors. Thank you.
Thanks, Erica. Maybe we'll go to Ethan and then Che.
Right. Hey, everyone. I'm like everyone who's spoken so far, I'm super excited and grateful to be here. So I'm Ethan Levine, as Jamie mentioned before. I'm currently an assistant professor of criminal justice at Stockton University, which has been kind of a wild experience so far, given that all of my background is actually in sociology, and all of my encounters with law enforcement professionally prior to this job were in my role as an advocate, sometimes cooperating, sometimes clashing with professionals in law enforcement through that work. And that's really been kind of the back and forth of my career so far, about 50-50 work in advocacy, supporting survivors of sexual violence and intimate partner violence, often with an emphasis on LGBTQ+ communities, and then academic research and teaching. So I'll say a little bit about my research for now, in that part of why I think I was invited here is that my research focuses largely on how we build scientific knowledge about gender-based violence. So looking at what research questions have been asked over time, who's been considered a priority population, a potential or actual victim, survivor, or perpetrator, and looking at how that changes across discipline, across time periods. And so I'll stop there for now.
So my name is Chase Shinoy, and I am really thrilled to be here and to be in a virtual room with all of these amazing panelists. So I am the Senior Gender-Based Violence Advisor, and I work at USAID, which is our international development agency for the US government. And I sit in the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Hub, which is lovingly referred to as GenDev. We do all the gender equality programming, and our role and responsibility is, looking at all the different ways that gender intersects with our international development work. And for many of you, this is preaching to the choir, it intersects everywhere. And so does gender-based violence. So I'm very fortunate to be working with Jamie Small in this portfolio. And prior to coming here, I am a lawyer by training and had been doing work at Peace Corps, which is another US government agency, as I'm sure many of you know. It's actually Peace Corps Week this week. It's great. I'm not a Peace Corps volunteer yet, is the slogan that you're supposed to say. But I worked there primarily looking at sexual assault policies and procedures for Peace Corps volunteers. Sitting in the General Counsel's office doing that work. And it became very clear to me, as I'm sure it is to all of you who are listening in, that sexual violence occurs everywhere around the world. And it is, a unique circumstance to be a US citizen and going through the legal route in other countries, as it's unique for immigrants to be going through US legal remedies in the United States. And so my role and responsibility at Peace Corps was very much trying to bring the agency to, to the best practices and promising practices for survivors of sexual violence, dating violence, and other gender-related crimes, as well as working with the agency on thinking through sexual harassment and employment issues that occur in every single organization, including violence against women organizations. And prior to that, I did a lot of civil litigation on behalf of survivors here in DC, representing them in civil court for protection orders. So much of my work is has been in the gender-based violence movement, and now it's squarely working towards gender-based violence in the international sector, but really trying to bring those learnings and the connections and the networks, which is what I love about this series this month, is connecting the international work with our local and even hyper-local work that's happening, because survivors are surviving and thriving everywhere.
Thanks, Che. And I feel like I want to emphasize that point, that part of the goal with this series is to draw those connections between the local, the global, and see, we live in this very fluid world, and right now we're all stuck at home, but then ironically, we can all come on the screen together. This wouldn't have been possible in quite the same way a year ago. So we're in a space where those boundaries are collapsing. And so we really need to take that into account in terms of thinking about how we do this work. And also, like, I think Amber and Rosa kind of mentioned in different ways, like not assuming that any particular spaces are immune from this work. And it's very cross-cutting, right? Like, it's not just about gender, it's about race, it's about social class, it's about citizenship status, like all these things are central. So thank you all. If anyone had any doubts, you can see that we have an amazing lineup of panelists who are just like bringing such a world of expertise that it's really fascinating even to just hear you each narrate what you're up to and the different ways that work on gender-based violence, sexual violence, kind of emerges in different spaces. It goes well beyond kind of the standard narratives that we hear in public discourse. So my second formal question, and then I'm also going to ask each of you if you have questions for each other. So if you have anything rattling around in your mind for someone else or the whole group, you'll have a moment for that. But I also wanted to hear from each of you kind of the origin story of your career. The work we do is hard, right? Like, it's not easy work. It's not for the faint of heart. Like, if you didn't care about it, you'd go back to finance, like Rosa started in, right? Like, and so those of us who do this work, it's not often for the money. It's not like for the glory or the fame. It's usually motivated by some kind of higher calling or passion. And I suspect that each of you has a moment, or maybe probably a series of moments from at some point in your life, your younger years, that kind of really motivated you, that galvanized you when you looked around you and you were like, that seems unfair, that seems wrong. I want to work to change that. And I'm wondering if you could share with us one of those moments, something that you feel comfortable sharing in a public setting, but something that kind of indicates what was that spark at some point in your life that pushed you to start doing the work, maybe not even in a formal professional sense, but just what got you going. And here I'll let anyone jump in. So whoever feels called to pop in, and we'll make sure everyone has a chance to address this question too.
Jump. With the silence and coming from finance. So as a child, my parents decided when we were entering into high school that they no longer wanted to live in the States. So that they decided to move back to the Dominican Republic, where I am from. So Afro-Latina. And seeing all of the systems of oppression in itself, I knew from that moment that either I needed to study law or I needed to do something totally different. But living in the Dominican Republic and understanding the systems, and we had to relearn the language because we spoke broken Spanish, not reading necessarily, all of that, and also understanding that the laws were totally different. But I also knew that even though we were being raised there because my parents didn't feel comfortable us taking the train or anything as we lived in New York, I always knew that I wanted to come back to the United States, that I wanted to do that. But if I was going to study law, I couldn't study law in the Dominican Republic and come back to the States and continue doing so. But I always had a passion for, that's not right. Why are they doing that? Why do we have to pay the police so that you don't get a ticket? And my dad would be like, shut up, you're gonna get us killed, or don't do that. I also recall times as growing up and then moving back to the States, even doing the work of making money for others, that I had this sense of, what am I doing? This is empty. And making a shift after I came back from the sabbatical from Haiti and the Dominican Republic, because I was right in the border. We used to collect whistles so that the woman would actually whistle every time that would have to move from their house, their hut, to go ahead and use the restrooms, because in that interval without electricity or anything, they could have been victimized, raped, anything could have happened. So when I came back, I was like, yeah, I don't want to make money for people. I need to do something else. And that's when I decided to work in nonprofit and working in the other organization. But it always was the sense of, we have a voice. There's so much more to say. And if not for me, for my daughter, if not for me, for somebody else. But I cannot remain to be silent or to be conformed to the systems that I saw that continue to oppress so many others. And that has been my motto and my passion throughout the rediscovering of understanding that there are other ways that we can continue to serve and impact, and even thinking about, if today was my last day, what would my legacy be? Would it be that your 401k was in the millions and you were okay, or was it that I was able to be a catalyst of change? And what was I leaving for my child? So that's what made me change and decided to be in this field, and been in the field now for close to 12 years, and 7.5 within the coalition at that macro level, and still loving the opportunity every day to understand that even though we're doing it at a macro level, there are other ways of having these conversations, whether it is as we talk about restorative justice or dismantling the police, or finding other holistic ways of survivors finding healing and their voice, that everything that we do, whether it is a training, public policy, direct service providing, or preparing a curriculum for prevention, there is an opportunity to amplify the voices of gender-based survivors and seeing those intersections, and that we can do that with an anti-oppression lens.
All right, yeah, thank you for going first. By the way, it felt a lot like class where, you're just waiting for someone to be willing to speak first. So on behalf of all of us, thank you, Rosa. Yeah, supporting other survivors has been important to me as long as I can remember, to the point that years and years ago, when I was trying to figure out where to go to college, it was really standard for volunteer work supporting survivors to be restricted to folks who were 21 and over. And I looked for cities with rape crisis centers that would take 18-year-olds. Like I chose a college in Boston so that I could start doing that work. My first day of volunteer training was literally my first day of classes, so busy time. And it was really fulfilling for me. But about 1.5 years into that work, I came to embrace my transgender identity. I began living as Ethan. I shared this with my hotline counseling supervisor and was fired from the Rape Crisis Center. Now, that didn't push me out of the movement. Clearly, I actually was already connected to a lot of people at an LGBTQ focused domestic violence organization and got literally scooped up, which was nice. Like a friend of mine told a person at that agency who was like, the Ethan that I know, tell him to come work for us. So that worked out. But once I got through the initial shock of that, that really pushed me to think about questions surrounding who do we think of as qualified to do this work, right? What communities are being given attention? What communities are being pushed aside, right? The fact that I was, with this one change, considered no longer qualified to provide support on a confidential hotline. I knew that that was false, but this was a mainstream, well-funded organization that, turned out to kind of have this really entrenched underlying assumption that only cisgender women could do this work, right? So that really motivated me to think about questions around gender, sexuality, and access. And one other moment I will share is that, so that would have been enough to keep me working in the field forever. But the more immersed I got in advocacy, I wound up having this experience over and over in which I felt that my experience and perspective and my colleagues' experiences, wisdom, perspective was sometimes dismissed by people in positions of authority, by people who were key decision makers, because we were just advocates and didn't necessarily regard or merit consideration. And there were also some gaps in what we could do, right? We were designing programming, we were trying to improve what we could do all the time, but we had limited capacities in terms of evaluating our own efforts. And I kept finding myself wishing wow, I really wish that we just could recruit like a Dr. So-and-so who we could trot out there and that person could say what we're saying and get listened to, or maybe that person could open up space for the rest of us. And years into thinking about this and complaining about this endlessly, to be totally honest, it occurred to me that, I'm pretty solid at the school thing and I could be Dr. So-and-so. And so that really motivated me to pursue a PhD and then shift back and forth again between advocacy and higher ed. And that has been effective in ways that are both wonderful and gratifying and absolutely infuriating, right? So I've had experiences in which I've said, sometimes verbatim, the same things that I had said previously when I was just an advocate, but walking into a space as Dr. Levine, I can command different levels of attention. So I am trying to be grateful for that and use those spaces effectively, but also stay connected enough to other advocates that that initial goal of trying to use this credential to make room for other people to get into those conversations, you know, stays a part of the work I'm doing.
Well, for me, when I was in college, I started taking more classes that I specifically took a class on sexual violence. And that was sort of an awakening moment for me because you think about all the experiences when you were younger, where the sexual harassment or things that you were going through, it was sort of normalized, right? Like you didn't think of it at the time as something that was that bad. So when we were, for example, when we were in Sunday school growing up and stuff, the Sunday school teacher, bless her heart, but one of the things that she would tell us is like, you need to cover yourselves up, right? You need to keep yourself covered so that you're not leading the young men down, you know, this road of temptation. So we would hear that. We would, me and my friends, like we would get hit on by older men and think it was cute or think it was funny because you're getting that attention, right? And so in our minds, that became kind of a game or something to laugh about. None of us had this language of consent, of violence, of boundaries. We didn't have that kind of education. And so we knew what, you know, rape or sexual assault was, so we thought, but in a very sort of narrow way. And so when I got to college and started taking these courses, and it was like you finally had a language to describe a lot of the experiences that myself or my friends had went through. So that was a pretty transformative moment. And then a year or two later, the Black Lives Matter movement sort of popped out. And originally, I think when I was thinking about sexual violence, it was like, okay, these people need to go to prison, like we need to do something, you know, lock more people up, you know, have better case outcomes. And then you're trying to deal with, but I don't trust police. You know, like police are out here killing people, and I don't trust that. I don't trust them to handle things that are going on with survivors. I don't trust them to handle other sorts of cases. And it was sort of trying to, the last 5 or 6 years, really trying to deal with how do we address issues of gender-based violence without relying on the police. And it's been a long time coming, but I finally sort of recognized myself as an abolitionist. It's a hard, you know, that's a hard one for me, you know, because I think those feelings of vengeance, of retribution are real. I think a lot of us feel that way, but we know, and I know from my own work, like throwing people in prison, prison is sexual violence, right? So that can't be the way that we are addressing sexual violence by throwing people in prison. And then the state is also a perpetrator of sexual violence as well. And so I think it was really, to answer your question, Jamie, it was really just kind of starting to put those pieces together in college and then now through graduate school, coming to sort of this understanding of what it means to be an abolitionist and thinking about ways to address that violence. Yeah, so I'll stop there.
I'm happy to share next. Thank you to the three of you who've already shared your stories. Your origin stories are absolutely inspiring. I'm really happy that I get the chance to be on a panel with so many really incredible people. So for me, where I got kind of the start, I was raised in a Reformed Jewish household. And I would say that my congregation was really focused on social justice in general. So I kind of had that kind of emphasis growing up. And I used to go to this summer camp every summer, and every morning we would start off by saying, we'd all get up, the whole camp would come together, we'd say these like morning prayers, and one of them was always this really fun, upbeat song, and we'd sing it in Hebrew, but it translates to essentially like, thank you, God, for giving me the opportunity to wake up today and repair the world. And so I think I was just kind of had this thought in my mind that like I, as an individual, have this opportunity to work towards making the world some kind of a better place, whatever that looks like. So that was kind of ingrained in me from a really young age. And then as far as my entrance into gender-based violence and the anti-violence movement, I mean, I can point to a really specific moment. It was actually my freshman year of college when I had a presentation from the peer education group that I later joined at UD. And we had this presentation that pretty much every first year student got, and I know that they're still doing it at UD, so that's really awesome. But it's a basic presentation essentially on consent and defining sexual assault and rape and stalking and dating violence, and thinking about bystander intervention. And so kind of basic principles and things that I think everyone should be aware of at the collegiate level. And then actually the day after that presentation, I still had like the flyer of like, this is what consent is, and this is where you can go if you need resources. My best friend from high school texted me and said that she had just broken up with her high school boyfriend. They'd been dating for 4 years, and she said that he'd been raping her for the past 3 years. And so that to me was one, way too close to home. It was like that, I was shocked. I was like, how is this happening to people that I love and really care about? And I think, so that was like kind of the initial moment when I was like, something needs to happen. I need to do something. And then the more that I kind of got involved in this space, the more I realized that that's really not that uncommon of an experience. Sexual violence happens to way too many people, to the point where stories like that are not even, totally uncommon. They're common enough that most people, I think, are affected by gender-based violence, either themselves or by someone in their life. So I started to realize kind of all of the ways that sexual violence impacted my life, both, very tangibly, like with this call that I got from my best friend, but also intangibly, just in the way that we talk about people and the way that we use language and all of these things. So another quick story that I had that I was thinking about was that my sister and I both went to UD. Actually, we were 1 year apart. And a little while ago, I was having a conversation with her, and she had told me that on the first night of her college experience, she and her roommate had a conversation about what they would do if either one of them experienced sexual assault while they were in college. And that was never something that ever crossed my mind, even though I was in the same dorm, the same university as my sister. And so just thinking about all of those things and kind of the pervasiveness of gender-based violence after that first initial kind of event for me really made it so I couldn't turn away and had to kind of keep doing things.
I can go. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. I think there's always many points where you end up thinking this is where I started, or that. For myself, I was a victim of, or survivor victim of, a crime internationally, and so for me, that experience of dealing with law enforcement and being displaced internationally, I think stuck in part of the back of my mind, and thinking about ways that we're treated when we experience things outside of our home. But I think I thought, well, I'm going to go home and do something that has nothing to do with this, and spent a lot of time thinking I was going to be engaging in other work, and then just kept thinking about that work, and ended up through work I thought was going to be related to health and language and translation, discovering that this thing that I had experienced was happening regularly, and started engaging in that, thinking about, okay, maybe I can get involved to help with this. And I resisted going to law school. I spent a lot of time avoiding that, so went a little bit late, but largely went because I could see these gaps in power when you are in a situation outside of your home country.
I stupidly decided to go at the end. You guys are wow. It's so many amazing intersections that you all have brought up. I mean, there's so many entry points into this work.
I am so sorry. Before you move on, and I don't know if this is the advocate in me, but can we sit a little bit with Erica? Because I just feel that even though we are at a distance, right? And in this community, I just wanted to emphasize the bravery and the tears. And Erica, we're so sorry that your involvement in the movement actually was through your victimization. And it just shows once again that 1 in 4, 1 in 6, right? So any of us at any particular time, or 93%, but we're here, we see you, and we're so thankful that more than a victim, you became a survivor and you decided to dedicate yourself and your work to advocate for so many others so that these things would not happen to them. So thank you. And I just wanted to acknowledge that for a sec. So my apologies, Chai, for interrupting you, but.
That's the best interruption. So thank you, Rosa. You're such a powerful force. And again, totally co-sign. Thank you, Erica, for sharing, and all of you all for sharing. Our origin stories are always incredibly intertwined, even if we think that we are the only ones going through what we're going through. So, I mean, I have very little to add except, you know, my story at different intersections have it's all in hindsight of how I got to where I am, which I think is just so important for us to recognize that some of these paths are unfold without much thinking, and our destinies are lie somewhere, and somehow we arrive, and we are arriving, right? So for me, you know, the fact that the work of doing gender-based violence and specifically wanting to work with young people is such a huge part of the influence of college and doing Take Back the Nights in college. And I went to a really big public university, UCLA. And there were, you know, to speak, you know, as Rosa mentioned the statistic, I mean, it felt like almost 1 in 2, everyone, even Josh's experience with his best friend. I mean, I had so many friends in high school, but we weren't calling it that. We were calling it something else. I mean, just the language and the power of language and knowledge, all of that, I think, culminated in college for me in many ways. And one particular survivor, we were starting the Clothesline project at UCLA, which was started in Amherst, at UMass. And we wanted, it was right during O.J. Simpson and all of that, that late 90s, mid 90s, late 90s work. And of course, now the documentary of Free Britney, and, you know, the linkages of paparazzi and sexual violence, I think, were very much there in LA at the time when I was a college student. And the Rape Crisis Center was pivotal in wanting to really bring the voices of young people into the dialogue of sexual violence, and really expanding it beyond sexual violence and thinking about all the different forms of violence that people survive. So that was kind of it was a pivotal point, and it wasn't even the issues so much as the people that were involved. I wanted to be like them, all the amazing resident assistants and resident directors and counselors at UCLA. And they were just very warm and willing to have tough conversations, or what we now call courageous conversations. And so one survivor in particular that made an incredible mark on my history, which, you know, an immigrant, was the first one in college in her family history, and was sexually assaulted in a fraternity, and was embarrassed and did not know, and came from a very strong religious background. But it wasn't so much of what it wasn't so much of all of those demographics, but really the lack of adjudication, I guess, within the college system. And back then, Title IX was really focused on athletics, and it wasn't really focused on all of the amazing work that has been done since. And you know, her story and a couple other survivor stories in my family and in my in college and high school galvanized wanting to bring young voices into this movement and really represent them. Like, you know, just thinking about how much power the doctor or the esquire or the even the parent has in these discussions. So it was very important for me to really start my work and in this process with working with young people. So that's, you know, kind of college and all the great work that was happening then.
Thank you all for sharing your origin stories, Amber, Ethan, Che, Erica, Rosa, and Josh. They're amazing. And I know they can be hard to share because usually the origin of being galvanized in this space is usually from a moment of difficulty or trauma or victimization. So I appreciate you being able to share what motivated you to do this work. And for those of you who are in the audience and were like, I logged into a webinar on science. Why are we talking about these personal experiences? To come full circle, I think when we are thinking about evidence and knowledge and feminist understanding of the world, it does start with our orientation in the world and the knowledge that we have, the questions we ask, the way we frame our experiences are only as good as what's around us, right? Like it always starts with our experiences. It can't end there. We can't be like siloed in our isolated bodies or our isolated communities, but that's where the knowledge starts. So I think that in laying this groundwork of like taking this moment in this really difficult year to share these stories and it's really amazing too to hear how many similarities there are across your different spaces, even though you are coming from very different geographies, different timeframes, right? Josh might not have been alive when Che was talking about the 90s, right? Like, you know, like, but there's still these parallels that come across different spaces. So I think that these thinking about knowledge and where does it come from and how does that build to scientific knowledge that's useful for the deployment of improving human rights, the common good, not for, as Ethan was mentioning earlier, sources of power or the way that also, the flip side of that. So thank you. I imagine I have a lot of questions and I would invite our audience to, I saw a couple, but to keep posing questions in the chat. But I'm wondering if any of you have questions for each other or for the whole group, because there's a lot on the table. And so I want to give you all a chance to share if you have on the panel questions for each other. And then again, for audience members, to go ahead and put your questions in the chat. And I think we have the capacity to have people unmute themselves. And so they, if that works out, we'll ask you to pose your questions verbally as well. But let's start with the panelists. Any questions that you have for each other? I'll throw out one that Mika said, which I was wondering about as well, is I think 4 out of the 6 of you mentioned religion as in some way or the other. I'm wondering if you could talk more about that, because that's a very different organizing way of understanding the world than science. So I'm wondering if there are any observations on the role of religion, either in perpetuating gender-based violence or conversely creating a space that of healing and hope and support. So any thoughts on the religious narratives that multiple folks brought up?
I think I'm the icebreaker um, within the group. But that source of religion, right, or wherever, normally all of us or any of us believe in a higher being or anything else, whether it's science or not, or whatever it is. But especially within most of our communities, talking whether it is African American or marginalized or coming from areas of oppression, religion can either be an institution of continuous oppression, or it can also be a healing process for some as they find a way to amplify their voices. I was raised in a very strict Pentecostal church, but I've always been a troublemaker and very verbal. And even as now, being an ordained minister and understanding those dynamics. And when we look at the beginning of the narratives of the stories, and not necessarily even from a feminist perspective, or even from a womanist human perspective, right? That you had no rights nor voice. How is it that messages and Sunday teachers and everybody else is telling you that David was great and Tamar should not have been in that space, right? Or that you could still see the dynamics of somebody being stoned, even Mary and Joseph, right? Because all of the sudden, all of this nature. So how can we continue to have these conversations about how everything is actually occurring, and the narrative more than from a scientific base, because we're always looking for evidence base, but there's a beauty in the way that we narrate our personal stories and how important it actually is, to be able to see how that source of faith, whether it is from the perspective of oppression or a perspective of liberation, to be able to find yourself in any of those spectrums. And when I talk about the woman within the Bible, or let's talk about sex, or rape and incest from a biblical perspective, it gives it a very different connotation when they're hearing about the terminologies and interpretations. So for me and in the field, it has been a moment of but also how can we change those narratives that are always coming from the pulpits to the centers, and also understanding that with some of the marginalized population, Latinx, Central America, South America, there is this component of faith, and sometimes they go to their ministers or first ladies to share their stories. And how can we share and equip the ministers to actually believe and to allow for survivors to find a way of healing within the pew without necessarily them having to continue to perpetrate the violence. So that is my experience in reference to the faith, and recognizing that it can be very oppressive as an institution, but also liberating depending on what you follow.
I'll just add on quickly to that. I mean, I think the same as Rosa. When I was in college, I kind of had a moment of having to distance myself from the religious community, or at least from my religious community, because there was a lot of, quite frankly, there was just a lot of shaming. Like when, for example, when someone in our church would get pregnant, like if they were a teenager, they would have to like get up in front of the church and apologize. And it was like a whole thing. And so when I was in college, I had to remove myself, I think, from a lot of that. But I think what was great was learning about other people's faith communities and how those communities have been sustaining in doing a lot of the work that I was interested in doing. And then there's another part of it, which is, if for me, if we're saying we can't rely on like sort of these penal and carceral institutions, the church is one of those institutions that's free, that people actually do trust, that people get resources from. So my perspective now is, how do I support, you know, regardless of what I personally believe, how do you support those institutions who have a lot of the same political goals and motives in trying to support survivors? And so I certainly think think of it more as like, how do we help build that capacity?
Amber, could you say more about, you mentioned earlier your belief in abolition, especially in relation to gender-based violence and sexual violence, and your work in Minneapolis with the policing. Could you talk more about that and what abolition means for you in this context?
Yeah, so for me, it's really about, and I'm, to be very clear, copying this definition from a lot of other Black feminists who have done this work, but really about sort of envisioning what a world without a reliance on the carceral state looks like. And so it's about defunding police. It's about taking, not just defunding, but taking the funds that we would use to build prisons, or taking the funds we would use to create more police. It would be used to have more healthcare, to have more resources that are readily available for restorative justice or transformative justice practices. I'm a realist. I mean, I understand that like it's hard, I think, to practice that. I don't think it's an easy road. I certainly would never tell anyone that who's struggling not to call police. I totally get it. People need to utilize the resources that they have, and it's complicated. So I recognize all of that. But my goal, I would hope 50 years from now, if I'm retired and doing a panel like this, that I could say that I did something to sort of push us closer to not having to rely on those other institutions, but sort of creating our own, or working with some of the ones that we have that I think can actually help people. And yeah, Minneapolis changed my mind on that, because like I said, I was doing research. We had interviewed 120 people from Minneapolis about their experiences with police. And I think when George Floyd hit, it was just a wake-up call that this sort of community policing model, policing reform, just, it doesn't work. I mean, Minneapolis had one of the most progressive policing reform initiatives in the country. Millions of dollars went into that, and we still ended up having a George Floyd situation. And people weren't sorry about it, right? Like, we still saw police officers brutalizing protesters. We saw the head of the police union criminalize, calling George Floyd a criminal and a thug. So I think that was sort of a moment for me where it was like, this is not working. In addition to the fact that Minneapolis police are notoriously horrible at clearing rape cases anyway. So I think all of those things sort of led me to a position of what else is out there? What else can we look to try to solve those problems?
Thank you. And I'm going to combine two of the questions that we had, even though they're very different. But one question is on how to incorporate genderqueer or transgender, or anyone who doesn't define in the advocate world as like the kind of like the conventional middle-class white woman who's traditionally been in that role. We also have a question about, this is coming from USAID employee, about how to be a gender advocate when you're doing other kinds of work. And I think those two questions are related, because in essence, they're like, how do we break out of the normative boxes that we're in, and how do we mainstream this, whether it's in international development or other kinds of organizations, workplaces, that how do we make sure that many people, even if they're not gender experts per se, have a language to incorporate this work, anti-violence activism, into whatever they're doing in their professional lives, their personal lives. So I don't know, Che or Ethan, those questions I think are closely related for both of you, although they do diverge a little bit.
I'll go first. Yeah, I saw that come in. So, yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of different things that you can do, and I agree, Jamie, that there is some overlap in those questions. One of the things that I was thinking about reading them both is that I think that there are often a lot of opportunities throughout different kinds of work to demonstrate attention to equity and justice, right? Kind of in any work where we have to give presentations or come up with kind of theoretical examples about something to share with people, that if we have to create, in teaching fictional characters for a case study that I'm working on, right, or writing a practice question for a statistics course, right, that there are often ways to use names, locations, kind of other markers of people's experiences and backgrounds and social positions to kind of demonstrate an awareness and respect for diversity. Right. Specifically within domestic violence work, for that question, I still have very strong memories of working briefly at a shelter where I felt very isolated and very visible as the queer person and the trans person at the organization. But then there was a night in advocacy training where the executive director spoke to us for about 2 hours on basic counseling skills. And she made a very clear and firm effort to vary up the relationship structures and the genders of people in the relationships that she was talking about. I remember one where she said, John and Tim have a fight and the police come and John gets arrested, which not only showed awareness that John and Tim can be there, but thinking about some of what Amber, you've brought up, also opened up this opportunity to talk about, okay, so how do we imagine police responses to John and Tim might vary from police responses to John and Sarah? And, Massachusetts had a mandatory arrest policy for domestic violence calls at the time, right? Someone was going to jail, right? So we had a lot of moments that way to, kind of demonstrate awareness and eagerness to do that inclusive work. And one other quick thing I'll say, I know we're, I think I have 4:48, is to recognize that that is often a slow and labor-intensive process, right? So for example, when I did lose that position at the Rape Crisis Center and was 19, I told everybody that I knew that this was the place that had fired me, not really in a bitter way, but just to demonstrate like, hey, like this is their idea about who can work here and who can't. And my transition to another organization wound up being fairly well known in that field. But the organization I went to had started out as a lesbian organization only, that broadened to work with lesbian and bisexual women, and then LBT, and then LGBTQ+, right? And just oftentimes you'd see, right, them changing who showed up in their outreach materials, making efforts to publicize openings to, LGBT specific organizations, people of color specific organizations, disability justice organizations, right? And doing that work in a sustained way over time brought a wider range of people in.
I mean, Ethan, I think you covered a lot of it. I think that I was going to say, I think the only addition is that you don't have to, you're absolutely right. You don't have to be in on a gender team or have, the title of gender in your work. We all have genders and live within different confines of what we have been prescribed and what we believe in. And so what I would say is that really continuing to bring it up, even though, so pulling on kind of the last point that Ethan was making, it's a slow progress, right? And to continue to pull on bringing up gender-based violence in a, in a space that maybe people aren't thinking about it, I think is critical. And it's even though I do have gender-based violence in my title, I still have to remind myself that I need to bring it up in every opportunity because of the fact that if I don't, we still know that gender-based violence is going to happen. And so our programming, any activities that we're doing, any of the outreach that we're doing, panels that we're on, we're going to have GBV as one of the potential issues that needs to be addressed. So keep bringing it up and create a support system if you can of people that you can go to kind of figure out how to develop a different pitch, an elevator pitch that might make sense in any agency or organization that you're in. Support people, have your support people help you even just decompress what that's all about and why there might be bias and prejudice in the organization and why they might be hesitant to be addressing gender equality or even gender-based violence in the expansive way that we'd like that to happen.
Awesome. Thank you both. So we are at time, but I want to take the liberty of asking if each of you could do like a 30-second what's next thought, like what do you want audience members to walk away with? This can be like super high level, big big picture, like pie in the sky, or nitty gritty, granular, like we need to consider this one little thing. So it could be anywhere on that continuum. 30 seconds just to, what would you like audience members to leave with in terms of thinking about this intersection of gender, science, and human rights, especially at this intersection of violence? And I'll let you go jump style, and we'll see if Rosa goes first.
I'll actually go first this time. I'm just going to answer the last question in the chat because I think it's so great, which for me is, I think it's okay to meet people where they're at. I feel like I code switch in language all the time. So if I'm talking, I have 5 brothers. So if I'm talking to them about something they're doing and they're out of line about something, I'm not going to go on a rant about like gender-based violence, this and that. You know, I think there's something to be said about like, I think it's a powerful term, but I talk about harm. I talk about, the fact that somebody's tripping, or I think it's okay to just use the language that people recognize, and just meet them where they're at, because change is incremental, it's slow. And everybody's not going to know the academic language that we use. Everybody's not going to call themselves a feminist. Everybody's not going to do that. So just kind of meeting people where they're at. And sometimes that means using language that people are more familiar with to describe acts that are harmful.
I would say speak up, speak out all day, every day. We need to keep speaking up. There's no, whether it's hashtags, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's in, your congregation, whether it's at home with your loved ones, speak up. This is, it's annoying sometimes that you have to do it, and I totally get that and vibe with it, but this won't change unless we continue to break the silence on these issues, from the micro to the macro.
I'll go. We need comprehensive immigration reform. We need reform to our immigration laws, particularly addressing asylum and gender-based asylum and other types of vulnerable survivor-based immigration relief, because we have pedaled backwards and we need to move forward.
I'll go next. We all have the opportunity and the ability to make a difference in one way or another. What you don't know, try to find out. And impact versus intent, always. There is no excuse. So it doesn't matter the intentionality in which you are doing something. If the impact at the end is causing harm, we have to sit with that and correct that, and not define what is inflicting harm on another person just because it's not affecting me.
I'm happy to go next. So I think one of the things that I've actually been thinking about from your list of questions, Jamie, is how technology and science maybe comes more into this. So slightly different maybe than the 30 seconds for the other panelists, but something that I've been thinking a lot about is how science and technological developments creates new spaces and new avenues for gender-based violence to become more pervasive or more hidden, but still there. And so I guess I'm just thinking about that, and that's something that I don't have answers to, obviously, and don't, it's kind of a half-baked thought, but just something to be thinking about, the way that I feel like we think a lot about technology as always advancing and moving forward, but how does that also create space for violence to transform and change is really important as well.
So yeah, something that I hear all the time, which I was also thinking about reading that comment about the language of gender-based violence, is that there oftentimes seems to be this divide that doesn't really represent anyone's perspective, but either that all we should be talking about is cisgender men's violence towards cisgender women and anything else is a distraction from the real issue, or that sexual violence, stalking, intimate partner violence have nothing to do with gender, and any talk about gendered patterns is a distraction. And that when you speak to real people within and outside of these movements, that most of us don't feel that way, right? And have a broader perspective, but that it is very possible to recognize that these forms of violence affect people of all genders, and also to center the experiences of people who are marginalized on the basis of gender, sexuality, immigration status, and other factors, right? So just working to hold all of that together in the work we do.
Thank you all. That's amazing. I'll give a shout out to Ethan's got a book coming out in the fall, so you can go look on your favorite bookseller to find his book on scientific knowledge and how we come to understand it in relation to sexual violence. So thank you all, Ethan, Che, Erica, Rosa, Josh, Amber. This has been really, really amazing. My hope is that we can use this knowledge to move forward. And again, like this personal evidentiary knowledge that is bolstered and supported by the deep work and advocacy that you all do in different ways, that I'm hopeful that our audience can take that and move it in different spaces throughout all the different worlds we're working, and to see these interlinkages between the local, the global, all these different geographic, cultural spaces that I think even just in your 6 stories that you've shared, the little tidbits, we're starting to see that tapestry of how these things emerge in different spaces, different times, but we see patterns, but also these spaces where we can make change too. And that's really the objective of this roundtable series, is to think about ways that we can use evidence and knowledge to work toward change, especially coming off of the difficult year that we've had, when we really need empirical evidence and rational, logical thought more than ever. So thank you. Again, for those of you who are in the audience, feel free to reach out to the Human Rights Center, to any of us. I can put my name out there, but it seems likely that our panelists would also be open if you want to learn more about gender-based violence. We are happy to send resources. Again, there's a wealth of knowledge here. We have 3 more sessions coming up. It's every Thursday in March. There's 4 of them, 3:35, about an hour-and-a-half conversation. Our conversation next week is on health. In 2 weeks, it is on sustainability, defined broadly to include environment and economic sustainability. And then we will wrap up our session in 3 weeks' time with a conversation on peace. Each of the panels has an amazing group of speakers. So we hope that you can log in and hear more perspectives on how to use evidence and science and personal experience in pursuit of human rights. So we'll log off now. I hope everyone can enjoy this new, beautiful spring weather wherever you are. It's nice and sunny in Dayton. So we'll see you in 1 week's time. Thank you, panelists.